Welcome to the Journey to CEO Success. I'm your co host, Melissa Saunders, and I'm joined by Patrick Tian. Patrick is an award winning serial entrepreneur, renowned CEO coach, and best selling author recognized by the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and Amazon. Patrick's latest book, The Journey to CEO Success, is a #1 Amazon bestseller and the inspiration behind this podcast. Hi, Patrick.
Hi, Melissa. Welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thank you. And our guest today is Joe Maglio, CEO of the Cheil Agency Network, CAN for short, a group of advertising, media, and production companies working with over 100 brands throughout North America. With leadership experience spanning top global agencies, Joe brings a sharp perspective on growth, creativity, culture, and what it takes to lead in a rapidly changing industry. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, Joe. Welcome to the show. Thank you for making time for us today.
Mhm.
Before we start and by the way, this podcast is about helping CEOs have a more joyful and successful life. So before we get into that and your story, tell us first about your firm. Tell us about the Cheil Agency Network. It seems like you brought a number of agencies together under one umbrella. So what problems do you guys solve? How are you guys different? Tell us about what you guys do.
Yeah, happy to. So, in the kind of most macro sense, Cheil Worldwide is an advertising agency based in Seoul, in South Korea, and they've been around for over 3 decades. And at some point before my time here, call it a dozen or so years ago, they wanted to make more of an impact in the U.S. and broadly the North American market. So they started to acquire other advertising and media companies that were really US centric. So I came in initially to run one of the agencies called McKinney, and I was CEO of McKinney for quite a while. And then ultimately, January of 2025, we made the decision to bring all of the agencies that Cheil owned in North America under one roof. And so we created this network formula. It's called the Cheil Agency Network. And we have a leadership team of very seasoned executives. And it's not a holding company in the traditional sense of the industry. It's really more of a network solution to bring the agencies a little closer together, help them to collaborate, bring things to clients that maybe one of the agencies doesn't have in their own walls, but may help with the client's business challenge or opportunity. And so myself and my team really are kind of those quote unquote cross-border collaborators. While the agencies maintain their own identities and their own leadership, we're here to kind of make the whole greater than the sum of the parts.
What is special about you guys? Like, why do customers choose you versus other agencies?
So we're in this really interesting mid-market where there are a lot of what I would call boutique agencies, largely on the creative side in the world that we work with. And, they can be pretty tiny. Frankly, they could be, two people, two very talented people. And then there's the largest of the large. And that's where, especially in our industry, the headlines over the last 12, 18 months, Omnicom acquiring IPG, BPP, Havas Group, Publicis, and so on. So we're not the big behemoths where a lot of clients feel that they may get lost unless they are themselves the largest of the large. But we're also not small where we can't scale and can't bring all the capabilities forward that brands and clients may need. So we operate in this really interesting and really powerful mid-market. And within the companies in our portfolio in North America, there is some crossover for sure, but each of them really has a unique selling point where they are best in class at a specific set of capabilities. So if clients need that, they can go directly to one of the companies in our portfolio. If they need a more holistic service plan, basically, then we can bring different agencies together to create more of an integrated way to approach their business.
So what's your job like? In other words, are you running these individual agencies or what is your job like?
So it's interesting. So all of the heads of each of the individual companies report into me. And so I'm ultimately responsible for the performance of each of the agencies, but also for the performance of the network as a whole. In my world, I focus on a lot of growth. So where can we identify opportunities, especially in the mid-market, where clients may not be getting the best capabilities or the right level of service. And we can offer that again, whether it's through individual companies or through the collective. So there's a lot of that. I also focus a lot on culture and mentorship across the leads and the executive teams within each of the companies. And we have a pretty interesting group of agencies. And I would hold in their individual capability area, I would hold them up against, any other similar looking agency. But what really sets us apart, I believe, is the culture and the people. So if you look at McKinney, for example, which has been around, they've been around for 57 years now. So they're the longest tenured of any of the companies that we have. in the last 2 years, 2024, 2025, they were not only on Ad Age's A list, which is the annual ranking of the top 25 agencies in the country, but they were also on the Ad Age Best Places to Work. And they're the only agency in the country out of the 14,000 agencies that exist in North America that was on the A list and the best places to work 2 years in a row. And so I think that's really the magic here. And that's just one of the agencies, but they're all very similar in that regard, where they're not so big, again, where people get lost. You feel like you're part of something, but they have some of the presence and the scale to really kind of help a culture continue to be positive and continue to feel something versus just a monolith or just a collection of a handful of individuals.
Yeah, so, let's lean into that a little bit. I mean, Stephen Covey talks about the fool's choice, which is, hey, you're either going to be happy or really successful. And as you know, I'm really exploring that we shouldn't have to make this fool's choice. In fact, you should be able to be both joyful and successful. And you have achieved that at McKinney. So my question is, how did we do that? How did you achieve both success and best place to work? And that's amazing. How did you do that? What's the secret here?
So I'll give you two different answers, and it's McKinney for sure, and because obviously that's where I kind of started, but it's really across all the other agencies. And the answer that is going to maybe sound trite, but is true, is empathy. I think it's hard to be empathetic if you're in an organization that's too large. I just think some of that at the leadership level, you almost can't do it to the degree that you might want to. So our size helps with that for sure. But I just honestly thinking that leading with empathy, understanding that, especially in our world, whether it's a media or production company or a creative agency, creative thinking is the value that we add to brands and to clients. And creative thinking requires not only an understanding of how other people go about the world, but you need to recognize that creative ideas can kind of come from anywhere at any time. And so you naturally have to have empathy to, I think, excel in this industry in particular. And that's really what it's all founded on, is really understanding the people within the companies, really understanding what they want for themselves, their careers, and even, to the degree we can in their personal lives. When I first started at McKinney years ago, McKinney was smaller at the time, but I met with every single person in the agency. And that went such a long way that the new CEO was sitting down with every single individual at the company. And I think that is kind of just the embodiment of what these agencies really are and what we strive, for them to be, is really lead with empathy, and everything else can follow.
So it's interesting you use the word empathy. So let me translate that a little bit based on what I heard. You say empathy, I would say when you said, hey, you met with every single employee and asked them about their careers and probably their dreams and what they want to achieve, I would say, that's really showing that you care. And so it's, to me, it's better than empathy. It's beyond empathy. I think empathy means I understand you and I empathize with what you want to do. But I think when you met with everyone one-on-one and ask those kind of questions, I think it really demonstrates that you care about the person, not just understanding, right? So I think, because empathy is about understanding, this is actually demonstrating care.
Yeah, I thank you for saying that. I think that's probably right. And, I think sometimes, especially in our industry, the idea of empathy or the idea of caring can almost get stretched in a sense too far, right? Where empathy, we need to lead with empathy and with care for the individuals. We need to really understand what drives them. I have no problem with anybody telling me their point of view of what they think the company is doing, where the company is doing well and where it's not. And I stress that early on. At the same time, you also have to be very, ready and willing to say, I heard you, maybe I empathize, but this is the direction we're taking.
Yeah.
And not everybody's idea is a good idea. And I think sometimes our industry can get lost in this. Well, if we try to care for people and hear opinions, then we're going to have to listen and follow every single thing. And then everyone's going to be mad if we don't actually implement their idea. So you have to care, but you also have to have the fortitude. And I think the clear control of the situation to say, I really appreciate it, but we're not going to do that.
I think what you're doing there, though, Joe, is I think you're leaning in with sincerity. In other words, what I've discovered in my journeys is that everybody wants to be heard. But you're right. I think our industry in general makes it feel like you have to do what people said. But I don't think that's true. I think people want to be heard, and then people want to know that you are either doing something or you're not. I think it's okay. Like most people I've talked to, they just want to be heard. And then if you said to them, hey, thanks for sharing the idea for reasons X, Y, and Z, we've chosen not to implement that because of this other thing. Most people are pretty happy because they felt like they had a voice. But having a voice does not mean that you must do what I suggest. I've not met many people that were offended that the company did not do what they suggested. I have met people who are offended when they thought that their ideas meant nothing. Like, hey, I shared my thought and then they just blew me off.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
sometimes what I've learned is that sometimes leaders didn't blow you off. It's just didn't come back to let you know, like, hey, thank you. We considered that. We just chose to do this other thing. I found most people are pretty okay with that. For all the leaders out there, this is a good lesson from Joe. Like, it's like if you get feedback from your team members, please go back and let them know, hey, we chose not to do that because we're doing something else. I think people are pretty happy about that. Don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. And to be quite honest, the people who aren't may not be in the right companies, under the leadership that's best for them. Now, it does get harder. The more we grew, the harder it is to do that proverbial like circling back and saying, hey, remember when you said this to me or us? We decided not to do it for these reasons. I think if you can establish the trust early on, then you
Yes.
don't necessarily have to go back all the time because people will assume that you did consider it and then you just had a good reason to go in a different direction.
Yes. What you said is trust. Trust, I think, is built upon a pattern of actions. So,
Mhm.
yes, I think if you have done the follow through enough times, trust is built up and people like already predict that, okay, you have done that. You have heard me out properly. So, I do think that in the beginning, whether it's a smaller firm or a larger firm,
Mhm.
fortunately, there's no other way to build trust. Like you said it's harder when the company gets bigger. Not impossible though. I think executives just have to work harder at it when the company's bigger. Humans don't change. In other words, I don't go, hey, I give Joe a free pass not to come back and show me this just because the company's bigger, right? Because I'm still a human. I'm still thinking, hey, I need my boss to let me know what's going on. So this ability to do that needs to be translated down to the people that work for you so that the care and feeding of the other people is always taken care of.
Yeah, and I think to that end, something that people miss a lot is which I'm not always great at, but I'm big on philosophically, is the idea of signals. So signaling is applicable no matter the size of your organization. I was actually speaking to somebody a couple weeks ago who runs a network much larger than the one I run, and it would be impossible for this person to sit down with everybody, even if it was in groups. But there are plenty of larger presentations and gatherings, and anyone can lob in questions. And then if you take a handful of people to dinner, you don't have to take everybody to dinner because then they tell other people, their colleagues, wow, the global CEO came in and like took me to dinner and just wanted to hear about my life and this and that. And then just by association, people start to trust you. Right. And so there's ways.
Yeah, then what you mean by signal? So
Yeah. So everything we say, we do, every physical manifestation of our worlds provides a signal in someone's brain. And it's either going to signal something positive or negative. And there's a spectrum. Obviously, it could be really negative or really positive, but you obviously want the net effect to be there are more positive signals than negative signals if you're trying to build trust. And so it's how you send emails. It's how you look people in the eye when you pass them in the hallway, whether or not you know their name. It's do you bother to take people for dinner when you're in another city, or do you finish your meetings and kind of go home and go to bed or go meet your friends instead of taking colleagues to dinner. It can be very, very small. It's how you treat. I mean, I always use this example, which is not work related, but it's the kind of view of how you treat wait staff in a restaurant. Like that's a signal to everybody at the table about the kind of person that you are. And
gotcha.
so when you're a CEO or in any position of leadership or management, you have to recognize that everything you do is either creating a conscious or subconscious signal
Yes, that's right.
in other people's heads. And they may not realize it, but there is a view of you that is building off of these signals throughout the day and the week and the month. And that's something that I've always tried to be very conscious about is like, okay, when I do this or say this or finish my email with this, or when I walk into a room, what's the first thing I say to somebody? Do I stand up when someone new walks into a room? Like things like that sound so minor. All of those signals add up to, do I feel like I can trust this person?
So I'm curious of your thought here. When you said all that, like somebody may say, Joe's pretty old school. Now I would say that I think to some degree, COVID and a lot of the work from home has made people less aware of these signals, but these signals are there. even in a Zoom meeting, even in a team meeting, even a video meeting, those signals are there. So you may have to be even more intentional about setting the right signals. Am I not wrong there?
100%. I think, video meetings are, they're the classic blessing and a curse. They allow us to be more flexible. If used appropriately, they allow us to be more efficient. They allow connectivity, right? Cross borders, cross time zones much more easily. But I also think it's overused. And, the balance of it is something that we're still trying to get right in my companies. But absolutely, there's signals over video. And I think what people forget is, this sounds silly, but especially if you wear glasses, everyone can tell if you change the screen that you're on. So it means you're no longer paying attention to a meeting because you're doing something else. The way the light reflects on your face will look different if you flip to another window on your laptop. Everyone will know you're no longer actually paying attention to the conversation.
I didn't
How you
realize
show,
that. You're saying the light on your face.
oh, yeah, you can tell the way you start a video meeting, right? Is it very transactional? Because it's on a screen, let's do this and get off so I can go pet my dog or whatever else it is I'm doing other than working. Those are all signals. But I do think that we are largely overusing that technology because I read something interesting about a month or 6 weeks ago, where there was an interview with heads of different AI companies. Some of the big ones, names we know, some we may not, but they all run newer AI companies. And they were asked, you all have, children on the younger side. I don't know if any of their children were in college yet. And they said, what will you tell your children when they do go to college to major in? Unilaterally, they said, I think they should go to liberal arts, and the ability to socialize and lead people is the number one thing, because we have no idea functionally what is going to be at their disposal at that point. But the ability to lead people and meet with somebody face to face, that is an art that is getting consistently lost. And I think the video conferencing is part of that. That's becoming the default, where the face to face, person to person outside of a screen should still be the default, in my
Yeah, I
opinion.
gave my children similar advice. I've got two daughters, one's 27, one's 23. And a few years ago when I entered the workforce, I shared with them, I said, hey, I would suggest you look for a job that has you coming to an office. I
Hmm.
said for a few reasons. One is the social aspect of that is important. I think secondly, it's so important to have mentors in your young career. I think it's really hard, not impossible, but it's really hard to find a mentor in a 100% virtual environment. Not totally impossible, because some companies who are totally virtual understand that,
Hmm.
and they go through the trouble of pairing young employees with mentors. But I think it's very different when you walk into an office. So first of all, I applaud all those companies who have virtual environments who are doing that, like setting up young employees with mentors. I think that's awesome.
Hmm.
I also think there's a difference as when you walk into an office and you connect with a senior person. The senior person decides that they like you and they form a natural mentorship. I remember when I was at Oracle, my first job, there's this guy that was a pretty arrogant programmer, and I decided I could learn a lot from him. And
Hmm.
so I asked him to teach me. At first, it was like college. He called me college kid. I don't know. He was a bit abrasive, but I just embraced it. And I said, hey, you know what? You are right. I am a college kid. You are right. I'm stupid. I don't know anything. So what are you going to do about it, Mike? And Mike, what do you mean? What am I going to do about it? I said, teach me, man. Teach me.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't know, college kid. Don't you? And he ended up teaching me. He ended up spending a lot of time teaching me Oracle, SQL stuff that I learned from him in 6 months. What would have taken me probably 4 or 5 years to learn. And no one asked him to mentor me, by the way. It was just, in the office, and I liked him. Actually, he didn't like me at first, right? Clearly, he called me college kid, but I really wanted to learn from him, and he taught me a lot. I owe a lot to Mike. So,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
the learning, I always call it learning through osmosis. That's the part that is actually a lot harder to do over video, because it's a lot of the recognizing body language. It's a lot of the conversations after a meeting or after a presentation. And we're just, broadly speaking, not as good at fostering that in a completely digital environment. To your point, I do credit companies who have figured this out,
Yeah.
but you have to put a lot of work into it. That, I think, is often neglected. The learning by osmosis, learning by being there. I mean, our companies are not in the office 5 days a week. I actually think, the benefit from all of the all of the changes that came out of COVID, we don't necessarily have to be all sitting in the same space 5 days a week.
Yes.
And I think the hybrid view of that, this is my personal opinion, is the right mix for the companies that I run, the types of companies and the types of people who work at those companies and the deliverables and the things we're on the hook for on behalf of clients. But it is hard to, unless you're really, really focused on it and really make it a real priority. It's hard to do all of this in a fully virtual world.
I took some really important nuggets away from you today. You used the word empathy, but I would translate that to truly caring. And not just having empathy, but demonstrating care and true concern for your team members and employees. I believe that's part of your secret of creating this wonderful place to work. So, our podcast is all about helping CEOs have a more joyful and successful journey. I think you have successfully achieved that. You have not made the fool's choice of choosing A or B, but you've done the A and B. What advice would you like to leave with our CEO audience on how they can actually have a more joyful and successful life themselves?
I think if I lean into your rebuttal to my empathy, which was care, I think if you care for other people, it naturally brings about gratitude. And I think when you have gratitude, are just generally happier. And I think that can come in a professional environment. I certainly think you need things that give you fulfillment outside of work. It can't just be all work. But I do think that caring for people, recognizing that there are people in different situations, that there are people who learn differently, there are people who think differently, and really making it clear that you believe, and hopefully you truly do, that all of that is valuable. That creates, I'm very, very grateful and fortunate for the position I'm in. Now I work really hard, but I also think that care leads to gratitude, and that gratitude leads to happiness.
Thank you. So powerful. Melissa, back to you.
Yeah, Joe, great words of wisdom. And thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your journey and your leadership insights, and reminding us not to change the screen while we're on a Zoom call with you. If you notice, my eyes are still looking at you. And thanks to all of you for listening today to the Journey to CEO Success. Join us next time for another conversation with a CEO about what it really takes to grow a business, lead well, and be joyful. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.